Hi everyone, welcome to my review of James Wan's Insidious in 2010, of course. So here we are with a film that I've had a couple of requests here and there, to review, of course. I have now seen it more than 5 times, and this was my rewatch, of course, again. Last saw it 2 years ago, and yes, of course, James Wan. Of course, he's made The Conjuring 1 and 2 as well. Saw, which I'm not a fan of Saw, but I love the Conjuring films. Cannot wait for the third one, of course, and yes. This is the first in kind of a big franchise now, kind of thing, and I have seen The Last Key now, and yeah, I didn't like that, and I don't really think too much of the sequels. But this one for me is the best, and actually it's the one that could be considered a very good horror film. I think this, when I first saw this, of course, very very scary. That's the thing to note. It really isn't. It's not quite your typical. A lot of the kind of modern horrors, it's not quite the typical one of that, but it has got some of the tropes that, at times throughout the film are a bit cheap, some of the jump scares. The difference is here, James Wan knows how to direct a horror film, and he really is. He's great in building the suspense, the atmosphere, and yes, of course I was completely scared of this film when I first saw it, and again, it really is just very good horror sort of direction. I think he knows how to kind of build an atmosphere, the dread, and yes, you've got an actual family here that I did care about. I think, of course, the main plot is Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne play this couple who've got 3 kids. They move into this new home, and of course, yes, very early on they learn that it's kind of haunted, or they believe it to be, and then of course something happens to the young one of the kids, and yes, basically he Dalton, and he goes into kind of a coma, and of course they move house again. They still find out that the kind of hauntings and the stuff going on has not changed. So of course, they get this kind of woman to come in and see what's going on. This medium, of course, and yes, basically unfolds from there. The rest of the film is them kind of trying to fight these demons, and of course go back to this other dimension really, and do things there. Astral projection is tapped into here, and of course there's loads of backstory in the film with Patrick Wilson's character, and the kind of linkage between him and his son. So yes, as well, Barbara Hershey is in the film. She plays his mother. So we've got a lot of things going on here. And yes, I think this has been praised as one of the best horror films of all time on some lists. I don't agree with that. I don't think this is a great film personally. I think it's definitely better than the sequels. Far better than them. Even the second one, it's a bit cheap, that one. Although it's not quite as boring as the third one and the fourth one. That is really. That's got some real lows, that film, The Last Key. Of course, they're mostly prequels. Of course, the second one is a direct sequel to this. But this one, for me, is definitely the best, although I don't think it's a great film. It starts off, I think, better than it kind of ends. The end as well itself is very cheap for me. But yes, basically, you're drawn into this family. It's good writing. I did care about this family. There's a couple of cringy moments between Rose Byrne and of course Patrick Wilson, but just a couple of moments, and it's still kind of nice in that way, if you know what I mean. But yes, it's a bit cringy, and of course some of it's not great, but it has got some good writing here. It drew me into this family. It made me actually care, and it wasn't a straight away jump scares everywhere kind of thing in the first act as much. You have this kind of wonderful build of atmosphere. Of course, things subtly start happening, especially to Dalton, and the way that he falls into that coma is really really effective, I think, and actually throughout most of the rest of the film it does kind of tap into the emotions behind that. It is quite a touching film in that sense, and it is in some ways emotionally stirring, and it does actually keep this up until maybe the final act, which it's not a bad final act, especially as far as a lot of horror films go, modern horrors, but it's definitely the weakest for me of the film. It does lose some character development and actual attachment there, and the actual emotion of it as well. It's not quite as scary, because it does unfortunately slightly fall into the trap of a horror film going all out kind of action. It loses a sense of dread, and it does reveal a lot more of the demon, the main demon of the film himself, and actually as well, you've got that guy that I don't know the name of him, but the one that was kind of going up and down, he was walking up and down earlier in the film, the one with the kind of the pale face and stuff. Early on, he was so effective, really, really scary stuff. And then when he's in that kind of scene where they're all kind of flying about the room, it's just, I don't think it's needed. Kind of diminished his character, that kind of demon there. But yes, you've got, of course, sightings of this kind of red-faced man, and of course that's kind of built up wonderfully at times in the first half of the film. You see him through drawings, and just general people kind of describing him, and of course he does show up here and there, but it's mainly kind of, you don't see too much of him, this demon. Of course he is in some of the other ones as well, but yes, I think it was really well built up, his kind of, how evil it was and stuff, and just the whole kind of demonic, kind of nature of it all. I love the scene, of course, where you just see, she's describing this dream, Barbara Hershey, and you kind of just see him in the corner as a shadow, and he kind of just points, and that was really, really effective. Of course, it's followed up with a jump scare, which is very, very famous. Again, that's kind of a good jump scare, if you know what I mean, but yes, because it is actually built up before that. There is some jump scares in the second half of the film, especially the final act, which aren't really built up. They're kind of just, they're thrown in there too much, I think. And of course, as we say, the character development doesn't quite follow through in some of the second half. Rose Byrne, literally her character, and she's a really good character at first, but of course they kind of, she didn't really appear too much speaking in the rest of the film. She really kind of disappeared as a character, and she was kind of just there because she had to be. You have got the comedy relief, the double act, of course, that come into the play in the second half, but again, you've not really got as much emotion in that. You've got as much kind of character development, and it doesn't quite, as a narrative, follow through completely. But again, I'd still say it just edges into that very good mark for me. And just the overall sound design in this film as well really adds to that sense of dread. It's really, at times you just hear the kind of the creaking and stuff, and makes it more tense, more scary as well. I love the use of music in the film. Tiptoe Through the Tulips, of course, a haunting version of that, which is one of the standout moments of the film. I think it's so well built up in the first act, and use of music. The sound design really contributes to the overall sense of dread, the atmosphere, the kind of offbeat feel that it has, and it's just very, very uneasy. And then, of course, yes, you have things building, and then you get more reveals and stuff. But yes, the use of music and sound design is great. It's got some really, really great direction at times. Just the way the cameras are placed, kind of slightly offbeat kind of angles, and just the whole kind of the way he subtly moves the camera, James Wan, at the beginning of the film, to kind of suggest things. It's just very, very atmospheric. The lighting, although I wouldn't say it's great lighting and stuff. It's a bit too kind of dull. It is very effective in what it's trying to do, achieving the tone, and it has got some feels, nostalgic feels in there. I do think this has some flaws, of course, as I've said. And none of these characters, are great characters, but some of them at times were, I think, definitely very good. They do slightly disappear, in my investment to them, in the final act of the film. But again, I thought the end of the film, even though it has a cheap ending for me, a kind of weaker final act, weaker than the rest of the film, of course. I think, did I care still quite a bit about this family, and did I kind of, was I entertained by this, and was it actually still really well made overall as a film? And I think yes, I have to say that. So I have to give it an 80% dead on. I don't think it's a great film. I do think it's very enjoyable. It's very well made overall, and it has got some really unique stuff here. The sequels, nowhere near as good for me, of course. They do kind of rely on this one quite a bit. The second one does massively. Of course, it's very, very in its kind of structure and everything. Very, very cheap. It's one of them sequels for me that kind of really, really repeats itself. And then of course the other ones are not directed by Wan, and they are not good really for me at all. The third one, when I first saw it, I just thought that was very, very bland. I've seen it maybe once or twice after that, and again, just realising how kind of much I didn't really get invested in the characters, and it's very, very dull, that film. The Last Key has some moments better than the third, but overall it is definitely worse. I will be reviewing them at some point, and yes, of course, the second one quite soon, because it is kind of a direct follow-up to this, of course. The ending, you'll know if you've seen the ending, of course, it literally hints it has to have a sequel, and of course, that one does follow on from that. The way it goes about that is a bit cheap for me, as I say. And yes, Insidious, a very good film. I highly recommend it if you've not seen it, of course. Most people probably have seen it. It's very, very popular. It's known to be one of the best horror films. I don't think that, I think it's probably among the better ones, of the century, but I don't think it's one of the best of all time for me, but the Conjuring films, I'm not going to say if they are, but they've got a better chance really than this. That's all the hint is. And yes, I think they are definitely the best films that he has made. James Wan, very, very good director, a great modern director, of course, of horror, probably the best, you could say. And he really brought something unique to the kind of designs of the creatures. The way it was built up was really, really effective. Confident direction for the most of the film. Slightly falling into tropes in the final act that didn't need to happen, and of course a cheap ending, and some slightly disappearance of some character development and over investment. But this is a very good film. I was invested in the family. Then when things did happen, I was really saddened and stuff, and just of course entertained. I think it's a very, very tense film, very atmospheric. Of course, the first half is definitely more scary and much better for me. But then you've got the kind of comes into the comedy act, double act. When they come into it, it still is very, very good, and then the final act does take a dip a little bit. But yes, this film is a very good film, very good horror, very atmospheric. Most of the time it's kind of made through a sense of dread. The exposition is very, very good. The flashbacks are good. The dream sequences kind of thing. And I love the kind of designs and the way that it's a lot of the drawings tell the story at first. That's kind of more effective. It's kind of like the Babadook. That was amazing, in what he'd done there. And yes, this film does that. And yes, I think a very good film, nearing into the good status, because of the final act it is definitely a lot worse. But yes, I think I'd recommend it. Of course, I will be reviewing the rest of the films in the franchise at some point, and of course the Conjuring films. They are the ones I love. So yes, here is of course are the Blu-rays of the second and third Insidious. Will be watched fairly soon for the second one. And yes, thanks for watching my review.